So, welcome to another episode of Colton Vita. Um, this is AKA the Selfish Guide, I'm calling it now. Um, Today is a
Okay.
special day. We have a special guest, Cormac. I'm going to give him a minute to introduce himself. Cormac?
Hi, Carlos. Yeah, so my name is Cormac. I'm an aid worker. So I work in the aid sector. I've worked for the UN, for NGOs, gosh, for about a decade now. Yeah, and I guess what draws me to this video series is that it's interesting to hear some of these concepts and these ideas expressed in such a practical and, I guess, usable format.
Great, great. Thank you. And thanks again for taking the time. I say this in my videos, but I think time is the most precious gift someone could give. So I really appreciate you taking the time to come on and help me out with these videos. Without further ado, we'll get started. The first question is about the first core. You ask, being positive now, what do you say to people whose negative beliefs and behaviors are seemingly entrenched? Um, I think it's an excellent question, and I think a lot of people are naturally drawn to this. And I think there are many reasons why, culturally, socially, guilds, religion. I mean, there's so many aspects that make you have these negative beliefs that don't intend to, but it's like a side effect that over time really causes people to become, as you say, entrenched. Um, I would say that you first need to want to change, and then you have to believe you can change. And I always tell people there's a million reasons why you cannot do something, but you really only need one to just jump to get yourself there. Um, does that make sense? I know it
Yeah.
sounds really simple, but like not knowing any background in reference to specific in reference to what we're talking about. A lot of times when I'm working one-on-one with someone, they'll tell me you see that they'll become negative and it's difficult to get them out of that. And so I have to try different things, but it's dependent on the person's personality, their character, and what they value and how they work with said subject that matter that we're talking about, and that would help them get out of that. But I think it's a very legitimate concern, and I think nobody knows Cormac better than Cormac. And so I really think that you have the best answer to getting yourself out of that entrenched mentality. When we would do a one-on-one session, I'm just listening to you and helping you reflect back what you're saying to help you get out of that trench yourself, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah, I guess, I mean, we've all come across those people, right? No matter what you say to them, no matter what you suggest, they seem to find a reason for why it's not going to work, and that way it's not going to lead to the result that you would expect it to lead to. So yeah, I'm just curious as to how you handle it when you come across those people.
Yeah, I mean, in reference to other people, I mean, the first core is all about the inside. It's all about what is going on inside of you. And when you think about other people, I know it's hard to just look at one thing like the core and not take in consideration all the other aspects. But I would say that if somebody is negative, um, and you care about them, try to help them. But if they hurt you or they're affecting you negatively, I would say get a 10-foot pole and, and have an interaction with that distance, metaphorically, of course, so that it doesn't affect you, but you show that you still care. And if they want to get out of it, then you're there for them. And I always say, if someone's punching you in the face and you love them and you care about them, I think it'd be very difficult for me to stay in that situation. I would get up and walk away and say, look, you can't hit me, that hurts. And if they hit me again, then I'd get up and get out of the room and say, you know what? I love and I care about you, and that's not going to change, but I can't be around you. It hurts. And I'm here. When you're ready to not do this anymore, I'll be right here, right outside this door, and I'll be here all the time. And I'm ready for when you want to stop this, I'm with you all the way. And I think that's a healthy way of doing that with those type of people, if that makes any sense.
It does make sense. And I think it's kind of related, I guess, to my second question, which is this idea of change and why some people find it easier to change and why some others don't. So I guess my question is, why do you think culture is sort of teach something?
It's very common, and you can see it in a lot of things. And I think that there's multiple reasons for it. I think that they believe in creating it. It's a good motivator. I think as a human being, we're very susceptible to not feeling like we're good enough, right? And I think that I think it all stems, I guess, if you go way back, we're social people, we're tribal people, we're meant to be around people, and we are empathic and we feel each other's feelings. And I think that stems back to that. When you are in a culture, you feel what everyone else is feeling. The problem is when people like religions and cultures and your family start to use that to manipulate you because they believe they know better, right? And maybe they do, maybe they don't. But when you start using it in that form, it becomes like this. It becomes, I would say, negative, and it makes it so you can't change because you're using fear as a motivator. I always say negative emotions are meant, you have to address them, you have to acknowledge them, and you have to just hug them till they're just no more. You embrace the feeling. But if you don't do that and you just use it as like a stick to keep you going, it actually gets gains more power. You have more fear over it. If you confront the stick, you're like, it's just a stick, it doesn't matter, and you can just let it go. But if you're still scared of something behind you hitting you, then it's going to motivate you. And I think culture used that because it was effective. I would say religions in the past, if you look and they say don't eat so and so meat, usually there's historical evidence that shows that pigs were killing a lot of people in that time. And so a religious leader would say, hey, we don't want our people to die, let's tell them that this thing is bad. And maybe they have a dream, maybe a god or their god speaks to them even. I'm not going to say whether it's true or not, it could be, but my point is it still comes from somewhere, I think, positive. The problem is it's like your parents, they really think that they're doing the best for you, so they start making you feel bad. They make you grow up like you're not good enough, and the only way you're going to be good at it, you get the degree if you do the XYZ. And it just, I understand where it comes from, but I think that it just doesn't work. And I think this is why it's so difficult for people to do away with that and just say, you know what, I don't need, Cormac, you don't need anybody's else approval. You are worthy right now, completely how you are, with everything you've done, the good and the bad. You right now are worthy of your own love. And you have to acknowledge everything that it encompasses and then accept it and then love yourself. And that's pretty much the first core. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think that sort of brings me on to another question I had after watching the first video, where you talk about this concept of loving yourself and believing that you're good enough. And so I guess my question, in your perspective, do you think that loving yourself or believing you're good enough is similar to the concept of forgiving yourself?
Yeah.
Or do you think that self-forgiveness is maybe too closely linked to guilt and that cultural concept of guilt?
To that, I would say yes and no. Um, in a way, I think the feeling of forgiveness is the same feeling you feel, but it's not forgiveness because what I'm saying, Cormac, no matter the worst thing you've done in your life, right? That isn't Cormac. It doesn't define you. It's one thing, and it could be horrendous and it could be bad, but that's not you. You make up all the decisions you made in your life. And I would bet money that when you made the decision, even though it was bad, at the moment you thought it was the best decision for Cormac. What more can we expect from an individual in the past? I don't think anyone goes and says, hey, let me shoot myself in the foot, metaphorically. No, we want to do what we think is best for us. And I know that might seem selfish and you might, blah, 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 but ultimately that's what we want. And sometimes they don't turn out that way. But I don't think you need to say, hey, you can forgive yourself for making that bad decision. You don't need to do that. Like, I think if you went back and did it a million times, you'd probably do the same thing because at the moment, considering the knowledge you knew, that was the best decision for Cormac. And I think when you can have the mindset and say, you know what, those bad things don't define me. They're a part of me. I learned from them, but I'm not going to hold them over my shoulders. That I can see how it's so similar to forgiveness, but it's different. It's parallel, but it's separate on its own because you don't need forgiveness. Those actions you did don't need anyone's forgiveness, not even yourself. They were completely acceptable, good things you did. They just had bad outcomes. Like I said, I don't think anyone purposely hurts themselves. I mean, maybe people with mental issues, but typically people don't hurt themselves. Does that make sense?
It does, yeah. In your video, the first guide, you talked as well about the system of ranking.
Hmm.
So I like that system. So I wanted to know if you could maybe talk a little bit more about this system
Yeah.
in a practical sense and how you apply it.
I love the ranking system. I'll be honest, but I don't go into it that much. Except I think I make a video about tips and just the recommendations. But I love the ranking system. But a lot of people don't like it, and I'll tell you why in a second. Because well, in short, it's difficult, right? And I think it comes down to it's one of the issues I've talked to my wife about in reference to is you have ranking is so hard, and you have to rank everything, right? When people say, "What are your values?" You say, "Being honest, being empathic." I mean, you could go write down all your values, and they say, "Okay, rank them." And it's people just struggle. I struggled, and you're like, "But I want to be loving and I want to be forgiving, which is more important?" And it's hard, but if you don't rank them, when you come into a situation in life and you have be loving or be forgiving, which one are you going to choose? You don't want to be in a situation. So the ranking system, I think, is so difficult, but so empowering. And it goes back to, like I said, in reference to my example of my wife. I told her if the house is on fire, I'm going to go get you out first. And I know that sounds horrible, but in my mind, that's empowering. I'm not going to sit there. I'm not going to freeze in my decision. I value my wife over my child. That's the way I do it. And there's multiple reasons for that. I thought about it, I meditated on it, I reflected on it. And I think if anything, it teaches my child what a healthy, good relationship is. And it doesn't, I hope also it teaches them that I'm not going to give up everything for them. I love them and there's no end to that love. But, there's, I guess, a line to be drawn. And that line is if I have to choose between both of them, I would choose my wife. And again, it sounds horrible. I've talked to people about ranking their children. And I'm like, if you don't rank them, it sounds horrendous, but I've even talked to my own mom about this. But eventually she's like, yeah, I mean, everyone admits it because it's true. There's really no way you can't have two. And if you can't put yourself in the mindset would be like, hey, you can only save one. What are you going to save? You're going to, and again, if you choose to freeze and say, I can't choose, then you choose to let them both go. And that's what's going to happen in life. That's really what ends up happening. You end up in a situation where two things you care about or love are needing your help. And you let them both burn because you don't want to choose one because the other one is going to take offense. And what ends up happening? You lose both. I don't think it's a good system,
So,
but I think ranking helps.
so I like the concept of ranking. I don't know if I agree that you need to compare them, like, or rather that there is one choice or another. So I like the idea of like ranking your values and ranking your approaches. I don't know if I could apply it to people. You know what I mean? Because I think that because people are mutable and changeable, and I don't know. I know that our culture, Western culture, does always kind of have it has this like theoretical construct, like which do you choose, this or that. And it's like the trolley, is it the trolley lever
Oh yes, the
philosophical problem?
people and
Like,
saving the
I
people.
just don't. I think it's an artificial construct. I just don't think. I don't think I would apply it in those contexts. But I like the idea of applying the ranking system to values or to the way you kind of think about the world. That makes sense to me. I don't. I just don't know if I would apply it to people.
Again, I go that extreme because I think people is the most extreme you can take the ranking system. And I say it because for me, it works that well that I can apply it to something that extreme. But again, it's just empowering to me to know myself and know what I value. And again, I mean, even if you can say the value is 0.001 less, if I ever have to choose, which most likely, statistically speaking, I'm never going to have to make a decision. But there's something empowering to be like, I know who's more important in my life. And it's the same thing with the values. Try it. You sit down and rank your values, and it is so difficult to be like, whatever your top three are. Oh my goodness, those last three to say like which one's more important, and just to put yourself mentally in a situation where, hey, I have both. Which am I going to choose over them? What do I and why, right? Like, is it because of legacy? Is it because this is what I was taught was right? This is because I believe is right, or whatever it might be. It's really hard to say love is more important than forgiveness, or vice versa, even. And I think, like you said, I think it's very good. I would encourage you to do it. It's very valuable, and I think that
Yeah,
you can only come out better for it.
I mean, I think you did say that like lots of people don't like the system of ranking. I think I can see the value of ranking in some areas. I don't. Again, like I wouldn't use it for people. I don't think, but I think I could do it for. Yeah, I think it's interesting for values and for those kind of like more philosophical questions. I think that's interesting to kind of give yourself a sense of where you of how those values or those theories relate to your perspective on the world. I think that makes a lot of sense.
Now, just to clarify, if you do it for people, I don't encourage you to then tell those people. This is a personal exercise to do. You don't go around saying, "Hey, I value one or the other." And the only reason it came up with my wife because we were talking about, how to emulate a healthy relationship to teach our child, what we believe would be a healthy relationship with a partner. So just wanted to make sure to add that little tidbit. You shouldn't go around telling
Yeah,
those
don't
individuals
worry.
if you do happen to
I'm
do
not going to make a top 10 list and then
Okay.
tell people to made the list.
All right.
Do it.
So the second core video, the first question is, I like the idea of appreciation first thing in the morning. How do you set this up so your journal is a more internal reflection? Um, I would say this depends on the individual. A lot of times when I have one-on-one exercises with people, sometimes they're more creative, they're drawing, sometimes they're more writing, sometimes they're just in your mind. And some people have this notion about time that it shackles them. It's this large weight on their shoulders. And so I would usually tell people just to start off, because I might not fully understand to what extent time plays a role in their life. I would say to just start with a simple 5 minutes in the morning, and to start with gratitude, basing yourself on gratitude. Almost always what I find with people with reflection is they tell me, I'm reflecting an hour. I'm reflecting an hour in the morning, an hour in the evening. And when they get there, they tell me, wow, I'm doing, instead of doing 100 things in a day, I'm doing 20. But those 20 things, I just feel so good. They come out so well. I'm so well organized. And I think it comes down to reflection empowers you to understand. And it's like a computer, right? You're taking all this information. It's a lot. And I think having a time to reflect in the morning or in the evening, it helps you put everything in perspective. It makes it organized. It says, this is the game plan. This is how I'm going to address it. This is the system I have to address it. And I always say, start with gratitude, start with appreciation, because a lot of times studies have shown that appreciation and gratitude are one of the strongest indicators for being happy. And I think it makes sense because we lose track. We get caught up in the problem because our brains are set up that way. And we forget, wow, we're really lucky. We have our health. We have that thing we did last week even. Sometimes it's like this morning, you hit it out of the park with something, and right now you're dealing with something that you're struggling with. And all you can think about is the thing you suck at. And you're not really thinking about how you just did really well on that project this morning. So long story short, I would suggest doing 5 minutes in a place that you already feel like you have free time. I'm talking about your commute to work. If you're riding a bike, you're not going to be able to read a book, or if you're taking a shower, in the mornings, you do it in the shower. And what I would say, just 5 minutes. I don't want it to seem daunting. I don't want it to seem heavy. And like I said, just start off with like, this is what I really appreciate. And ideally, from there, move to the second step, which would be, if it involves a person, is to then communicate in that day to that person. Like if you're like, I really appreciate having XYZ in my life, and just picking up the phone, sending an email, sending a text, even super simple. Just be like, hey, you know what? I was just thinking, I just feel so fortunate that you're part of my life. And that's it. It's so simple, it's easy, but it's going to show that person. It's good. You'd be amazing at the power that it can have in that person's life. But journaling, it works really well with a lot of people. I would say putting it on paper, however form you want, creative, artistic, writing, whatever it might be, whatever you feel most comfortable with, I think has a lot of power, especially because you can go back and look at it. But some people writing, and I'm one of those people, seems a little daunting in the beginning, because you want to write it well, you want to make it sense, and you want to think of your whole idea, and you want it to flow. But it's just about putting these ideas that are in your head and rattling in there a place to be. Because so many times we're like, oh, we need to do that. Oh, we need to do that. And we don't have a system and how we're going to organize it, how we're going to put it in our schedule or in our system. And sometimes for me, one of the biggest things for me is that maybe list, right? I keep thinking I want to do this with my baby. I just don't ever have time. And I just keep thinking, I keep writing, and just make space. And it just hangs and it's heavy. And then I just write it down on my maybe list. And then I don't have to think about it. And whenever I have free time, I'm like, hey, what's on my maybe list? oh, read that book with my baby. Okay, great. And I go and do it. But then I don't have it back here. I think reflection is about clearing the mind. There's just so much going on in there. And when you clear it up, however process you have, it's night and day. You just feel so much better.